Sometimes a random loadout gives you exactly what you need, and sometimes it gives you a sickle, a veto, dynamite, quasar cannon, a 380mm barrage, a rocket sentry, and a warp pack. Which sounds pretty good, until you realize I have no idea how these weapons are supposed to work together. So today, I'm going to break down this completely random loadout and figure out whether randomness has actually created a great build or one of the weirdest loadouts I've ever used. First up, we've got the sickle. And honestly, this might be the easiest weapon in the entire loadout to understand. The sickle is great for dealing with the smaller enemies because it has a high rate of fire and doesn't rely on a traditional magazine in the same way a lot of other weapons do. This makes it extremely useful when you have a lot of smaller enemies coming at you. And because we're dealing with a random loadout, having a reliable primary is extremely important. The sickle gives us something we can fall back on, but it does have some weaknesses. First, it's not the weapon I want to be relying on when heavily armored enemies show up like the Hulk or the War Striders. That's where the Quazar cannon is supposed to come in. And because the sickle is a laser weapon, managing its heat becomes important. If you constantly hold the trigger down, you're going to run into problems. So the sickle is a fine primary, but it's really filling one specific role. Clear the little guys, and leave the big guys to something else. Next is the veto, and this is where things get more interesting.
Okay, this gun sucks.
The veto gives us another way to deal damage without relying entirely on the sickle. That makes it useful when we're switching between targets and need something different from our primary. Having a secondary that can fill a different role is always valuable in a random loadout. But there's also a problem. Because we already have the sickle handling most of our basic enemies, the veto can sometimes feel like it's competing for the exact same job. So while it's useful, I'm not sure it's bringing as much variety to the loadout as I'd normally want from a secondary. Basically, the sickle is our bread, and the veto is more like a side dish. Nice to have, but I'm not building the entire meal around it. Then we've got Dynamite. And this is one of those pieces of equipment that can be amazing, if you actually have a reason to use it. Dynamite gives us a powerful throwable that can be used against tougher targets and fabricators. And unlike something that's mainly designed for clearing small enemies, Dynamite gives us another option when Hulks, War Striders, and the inevitable Factory Striders show up. That's a big positive, because this loadout doesn't have unlimited number of answers to every situation. Having a powerful throwable gives us another tool. It has 3 timer settings, 5 seconds, 15 seconds, and 60 seconds. I've never used it on anything other than the 5-second timer, so I can't speak to how useful those other 2 settings are. But the downside is pretty obvious. You have to actually throw it correctly. Normally that is not an issue, but with the Desert Stormer heavy armor, which gives us 40% resistance to fire, gas, acid, and electrical damage, but also increases our throwing range, which you would think is a positive, but if you haven't used it before, it can definitely cause some problems.
Excellent weapon. I hear you behind me.
Oh! There's no point having an incredibly powerful explosive if you completely miss your target. So Dynamite has a pretty high ceiling. Use it correctly, and it becomes extremely useful. Use it badly, and you basically get thrown away your grenade slot.
Does that do it?
Now we get to the weapon that's probably doing the most important job in this entire loadout, the Quazar cannon. This is our dedicated anti-tank weapon and fabricator destroyer. And I actually think the Quazar fits this loadout really well. Why? Because the sickle and veto can handle smaller enemies, while the Quazar is responsible for the heavy ones. The biggest advantage of the Quazar is that it doesn't rely on traditional ammunition similar to the sickle. That means we're not constantly worrying about running out of rockets. And because it doesn't require a backpack, we can use the warp pack, and that's a pretty important combination. But the Quazar isn't perfect. The biggest downsides are obvious. The biggest downside is the charge time. You can't just instantly pull it out and fire. You need time to charge the shot, and after firing, you have to deal with the cooldown. So the Quazar rewards patience. It's not necessarily the best weapon for something suddenly appearing in front of you, but when you have distance and time to prepare, it becomes incredibly powerful.
Snipe you out real quick.
Next up is the 380mm Barrage, and this is where the loadout gets a little chaotic. The 380mm gives us a way to deal massive amounts of damage over a large area. Let's throw a 380 way in there. That's useful when you're dealing with large enemies or heavily defended areas. And unlike weapons, we don't have to personally shoot every enemy. We can basically toss it and say, go blow up that entire area. But there's also a pretty big downside: precision. 380mm is not exactly known for politely hitting the exact enemy you wanted it to. And when you're fighting close to your teammates, that can become a problem. So the 380mm is powerful, but it's also a commitment. You don't want to just throw it because you see 3 enemies. You want to use it when there's enough of a target to justify turning the entire area into an artillery range. Then we got the Rocket Sentry, or Rocky as I like to call him. And I actually really like this addition to the loadout. Rocky is one of my favorite stratagems to take on the bot front. The biggest advantage of the Sentry is that it gives us a source of damage without requiring us to personally aim and shoot. The Rocket Sentry can provide additional firepower while we're focused somewhere else. And that's especially useful when we're already trying to manage the sickle, veto, Quazar, Dynamite, and everything else. But there is a downside. The Rocket Sentry doesn't exactly have human judgment, and that's probably putting it nicely. Target selection matters. Placement matters. And if you put it somewhere stupid, you're basically donating a sentry to the enemy. So, the Rocket Sentry is powerful, but it requires some planning. It's not just a button you press and forget about it. And finally, the Warp Pack. This might actually be the piece of equipment that makes the entire loadout more interesting. The Warp Pack gives us mobility, and the mobility is something this loadout desperately wants. The sickle and veto are relatively straightforward weapons. Quazar requires time to charge. The 380mm requires positioning. The Rocket Sentry requires good placement. And the Warp Pack gives us another way to move around the battlefield. That's a huge advantage. But again, there is a downside. Mobility doesn't actually mean survivability. Having a Warp Pack doesn't mean you can ignore positioning. If you use it badly, you can end up in an even worse position than when you started. I healed! Did you not see me heal? So it's incredibly useful, but you have to actually know when to use it. So now that we've looked at every individual piece of this loadout, does this random loadout actually make sense? Surprisingly, I think it does. The sickle handles smaller enemies. The veto gives us another weapon for general combat. Dynamite gives us an additional explosive option. The Quazar handles heavy armor and fabricators. And the 380mm gives us large-scale area damage. Rocky adds automated firepower, and the Warp Pack gives us mobility. Every part of the loadout has a job, but there are some weaknesses. We don't have the most versatile secondary. The Quazar requires patience. The 380 isn't very precise. The Rocket Sentry needs good positioning. And the Warp Pack doesn't solve every mobility problem. So this isn't the perfect loadout, but honestly, that's what makes it interesting. If I had to rate this random loadout, I'd give it probably a 6.5 out of 10. The sickle is reliable, but better suited to deal with the squids or bugs. The veto is useful, but I'm not a big fan of it. Dynamite gives us another powerful option, and the Quazar is our heavy-hitting backbone. The 380 gives us serious area damage, and the Rocket Sentry adds extra firepower. And the Warp Pack gives us the mobility to tie everything together. The biggest problem is that almost every part of this loadout requires you use it correctly. So it's not necessarily a loadout that's going to play itself. But if you can manage all these pieces, it actually becomes a pretty well-rounded build. And that's the problem with random loadouts. Sometimes randomness gives you the perfect build. Sometimes it gives you this. But there's only one way to find out if it actually works. Use it. So what do you think? Is this random loadout actually good? Or did the randomizer completely screw me on this mission? And if you'd like to see the live commentary video of me using this loadout, check the video in the description below. And as always, if you liked this, please leave a like, and if you want to see more, please subscribe. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And for Super Earth,